Salam to y'all. Shalom, Chabarim. Yes. The reason, here. The reason for the season, here in this season, the darker season of the Shana of the year, as the heavens turn around this earthly plane right here. The reason for the season, Hanukkah. What is Hanukkah? And why Hanukkah? All right, so addressing the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and also the very important H, how for this season for Hanukkah. What is Hanukkah? And also why Hanukkah here in the season. Now, the first item, the most important item, right, of all the items on the agenda is concerning the how right here, right now, right here, just touching on the how of Hanukkah. The menorah or the Chanukiah? Chanukiah or no Chanukiah? This is the question to be decided. Chanukiah or no Chanukiah? Now, what is the Chanukiah? Now, the Chanukiah is something that has developed in the Jewish or Judaic tradition, right? And we're still doing a lot of research on this to see, well, when did this nine branch candelabrum, so to speak, speaking of the candlestick holder that has 9, as opposed to what the scripture shows us, even in the season, in the real when of Hanukkah, had 7. So we're looking at, is it the 9 branches or the 7 branches? Now, one can, and perhaps will choose, many have chosen, and many Yehudi, whether it's the Ashkenazi, Sephardics, and even many of our own, we the black Jews, many might choose to use the Chanukiah, and the Chanukiah is the one that has the 9 branches. But when we study the books of Maccabees, right, the scriptures, right, the apocryphal, what's called apocryphal scriptures, and other historical and maybe extra biblical, as one might say, points of reference, we find that during the time of the Maccabees, Judas, Judas, aka Judas, there's more Judases than this Iscariot, let's not get confused with Judah, Yehuda, and Judas, right? So Iscariot is the one who betrayed our black Lord and Savior, Yeshua HaMashiach, Rabboni, Yeshua, our Rabbi, the Rabbi of Rabbis, our black Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Now, what's interesting is that we find Hanukkah, right? Hanukkah also in the Brit Chadasha, in the New Testament, the Hadith Kidan, in the New Testament, or in the New Testament scriptures. We find it as the Feast of Dedication. So if you look up in the Bible, feast and dedication, you'll find the Feast of Dedication. Now, these are all points of references that are very important for us to make reference to, and also to, study, scrutinize, and to reason on, so we can get a true context of this feast or festival, the festival here in the season. Now, it's not one of the 7 appointed, the Mo'adim. What are the Mo'adim? The Mo'adims are 7. And these we find to be summarized and gone over in Leviticus, Wayikra, also called Vayikra, right? Modern Hebrew to say Vayikra. In the ancient Hebrew, it will be Wayikra. In the book known as Leviticus, the 3rd book of Moshe, the Hebrew book that is called Leviticus chapter 23. We have the Mo'adei Yahweh, the Mo'adei of He who be who He be. Right? We have the 7 appointed feasts, and this takes place in the what we call the ecclesiastical or the Hebrew churchical year. The ecclesiastical year. Now, the word moed, also we have it in Psalm 74. I think there's two places that is translated in some translations as meeting place, and also we find it as translated in the KJV, King James Version of the Bible, in the Old Testament as synagogue, the synagogues. Now we're going to point to this because also these are the Psalms that, according to the royal order of the Ethiopian Hebrews and the ancient Israelites of Ethiopia, and also the true and the faithful Christians of the Ethiopian Tewahedo Church, the Orthodox Church, we find these points of reference there. But here to speak about the Chanukiah or no Chanukiah. Now the reading in this season for us is from Maccabees chapter 4. Now in the better translations of Maccabees chapter 4, we find it to be in Lost Books of the Bible, Forgotten Books of Eden. That particular document called Lost Books of the Bible and Forgotten Books of Eden or Eden. That has Maccabee chapter 4 and Maccabee, the fourth book of Maccabees, the fourth book of Maccabees, which has 8 chapters. So for us, it's appointed to read and to study on the 8 days of Hanukkah, one chapter, a chapter a day from Maccabees chapter 4. Now, there are other translations of Maccabees chapter 4 that divide the chapters in some odd and strange ways. So therefore, it's not 8 chapters in Maccabees chapter 4 in some translation, but the most authorized and proper translation of Maccabees chapter 4. This is a very important note because when on the air, different brothers would read different chapters, it caused some confusion because they might have found other translations of Maccabees chapter 4 other than the more official and proper translation of Maccabee chapter 4 that we find to be translated in English in the document known as Forgotten Books of the Bible, Lost Books of the Bible, Forgotten Books of Eden. That's the title right there. We'll get the cover as well, right, for this vlog here, this, we could say, a lecture, brief reasonment. But the main theme here still is menorah, the menorah, or the Chanukiah. Chanukiah, which is the 9-branch candelabrum or candlestick, candle stand. Actually, see, here's where we have to get into the roots of what really occurred, right? This now deals with the who, what, where, when, and why. That's the basic historical, scriptural perspective, and it's the books of Maccabees that you will find as well in the original printings of the 1611 King James Version of the Bible. That also has Maccabees there, some of the apocryphal books. Now, in most King James versions of the Bible, there would be 66 books, and this is the latter printing and publishing of it. But in the original King James 1611 version, it has actually the apocryphal books, many of the apocryphal books, not all of the apocryphal books, but many more of the apocryphal books. I think that Jubilees and Enoch is not in there, but we'll check that and consult that again. But the subject matter here is concerning Maccabees. So Maccabees, the books of Maccabees, there's first Maccabee, there's second Maccabees, there's third, and there's fourth Maccabees, right? That we have referenced, and it's the fourth book of Maccabees that in the proper translations, the real translations and division of the chapters would have 8 chapters. So look for the Maccabees 4 with 8 chapters. Very, very important, and a chapter a day of those 8 chapters, right? For the point reading, right? The reading, the light, right? Spiritually speaking, for those 8 days, right? So it's the 8 days. Now, once again, to the Hanukkah or Chanukiah, and also the point of reference to the Feast of Dedication, the Feast of Hanukkah, found in the New Testament of the Bible. In particular, we have John's Gospel, or the Gospel according to John, St. John, chapter 10, verse 22. And it was at Jerusalem, or Jerusalem, the Feast of Livication. Now, I as Rastafari, of course, is called in the translations dedication, dead. All right, we burn out the dead vibes, but, understanding what dedication means in the context means that we will have to then go to the scriptures to really get the scriptural point of reference. But here we're pointing to Hanukkah being observed even by Robenu, our rabbi, the rabbi of rabbis, Ha'adon Yeshua, the Lord Jesus, called by the world Jesus Christ. Here in the New Testament, in John chapter 10, verse 22, it says, it was at Jerusalem, the Feast of Livication, KJV Bible's dedication, and it was winter, as we are here in this winter season. Now, Hanukkah usually occurs in November or December, right? Here in the year after 400 years, it's occurring in December, but whether November or December, what we have is the winter. So John chapter 10, verse 22, and it was at Jerusalem, the Feast of Dedication, the Feast of Hanukkah, the Feast of Livication, and it was winter. John's Gospel, chapter 10, verse 22, as a New Testament Berit Chadasha, point of reference to the observation of Hanukkah. All right, so this is also to the what, where, why, when, who, right? But now, in speaking about the how, right? In speaking about the how of Hanukkah, let's go to some of the points of reference right here. Now, of course, here, just to share this right here, the book of Maccabees, right? This concerns our Hebrew, our Israelite, our Yehudi, our Judahite, ones might say correctly, our black Jewish history. This is one of the books that they took out, but it's in the original. Originally, it was in the 1611 printing of the KJV, the King James Bible, the book of Maccabees, All right. Now, although the 1611 printing of the King James Version of the Bible has many of the apocryphal books, there are still certain books that were not printed or published, but we have a little more books right here, and this is the book that we're focusing on, is Maccabees. Who is Maccabee? All right, the connection of Maccabee, and also for I as Rastafari, where one say the Maccabee Bible. Give us the Maccabee Bible. All right, that's the Bible given to black man. All right, give us the Maccabee Bible. All right, because King James was a white man. This is what has been said, but we get to learn and find that that is erroneous, that King James, as well as the other black Scottish kings, were not white men. Right? This is also another point of study, point of dissemination, point of also proving and, showing one's available information where we can prove that right there. Right? But the important point is that the first proclaimers of Rastafari, right, linked I and the call of Rastafari with Maccabees. Why? Why was the link with Maccabees? Now, this is where the history of the time period known as the Maccabee period is connected with the Feast of Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication, the Feast of Livication, also called the Feast and the Festival of Lights. Now, it's connected with the observation of the menorah and the lighting of the lights. Is connected with the narrative that one day's worth during this time of resisting assimilation, right? This is during the time of the Greeks, and what was going on with the Hebrews and the Israelites, living in the image, we can say, of the beast, as we have this in the New Testament, living in the image of the beast and forsaking their own heritage, forsaking their own roots and their own, you could say, culture, their own identity, and seeking to assimilate assimilate, in, we could say, the world, flesh, and the satanic system of things at that time, which was being run by the Grakkoi, or the later day Greeks. Because the earlier Greeks, the original Greeks, were Javanite people, Yawanite people, or Ionian people who were black people. So we're speaking about the later day Greeks. Right? We could say, quote, the white Greeks. Right? And there was many of the Israelites and the Hebrews and the Yehudi and the Jews who were living and assimilating into the system of things. Right? What we will call today we'll call it like the whitewash, right? The whitewash, or trying to live outside of the covenant and outside of their own heritage and outside of their own culture, right? So the Maccabee, right? The fight of the Maccabee. This is a fighting holiday, fighting holy days, resisting assimilation, reclaiming, right, one's culture, but reclaiming the covenant and the cultural, we could say, the covenant culture, All right, so we could get into some of the details. Details are very important because in the Rastafari, the original, let's say the original Rastafari, because there seems to have been a falling away among certain ones, even some elders, pseudo-elders, right, who turned their back on the Bible, on the teaching of His Majesty, right, the glory of His Majesty, right, and these sort of observations, right, which are at the roots of Rastafari and also at the root of the namesake of Rastafari, I, the children, the people, and that's the Rastafari Mekonnen, also known as Kedemawi Haile Selassie, the King of Kings of Ethiopia, the true King of Yisrael, the true King of Israel, representing we, the Israelites of Ethiopia, and the called, chosen, and faithful, the true church and the professing church, the church of He who have the key of great King David, the key of King David, the church of Philadelphia, the church of brotherly love. So that's pointing to Revelation right there. Now, Revelation is also a very important book as well because it reinforces the main theme of this particular vlog and this particular reasonment right here. And this is regarding, let's go through some of these pictures right here just to share this. Now, this is from 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verse 48. And laid open the book of the law, the book of Ha-Torah, right? The Torah, right? The direction, instructions. We say the teaching, give us a teaching of His Majesty, wherein the heathen, speaking of the Goyim, the other nations and nationalities, especially like the Greeks of that time, and furthermore, in the time of Robenu, Yeshua, the Greco-Roman, right? And even coming on today to the Anglo-American, or the WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, the whitewash, right? Wherein the heathen, the Goyim, the other nations, the other nationalities, other than called Yisrael, other than Israel and the Israelites, right? Wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. So this is also a very important theme of Maccabee, right? And thus also it builds on that original word sound and inspiration amongst the called, chosen, and faithful, and the first proclaimers of Rastafari concerning Maccabees, concerning the Maccabee Bible, right? And the Maccabee Bible and the black man, or we could say the Israelite, the black Jew, the black Jews of the Lion of the tribe of Judah, right? Yes, I. Now, here is from the other Israelites, some of the other Israelite camps and mansions out there, right? Sometimes we do refer to them as the ain't right Israelite, because some things they don't have right, but the basic roots of who we are, we, the once lost, now found, right? The black and the brown and the ruddy peoples of the world, especially over here in the Americas and the Caribbean, that aspect there basically is right and exact, especially where it points to the scriptures and who we are, right, as a people, generally speaking. But I noticed this, they have this on Maccabees because many of them also observe Hanukkah, which was kind of interesting, that they do observe some of the other Israelite camp. We know that ISUPK, is observing even this year and previous years Hanukkah, In fact, on a radio broadcast with Brother Ross Lawrence, what you know about God and his chosen people, and one of their captains, Captain Azania, he was also speaking about, the observance of Maccabees, or at least the observance of Hanukkah. And we came across this as we're preparing here for Hanukkah in this season. And what we found to be interesting, Ainai Chabruta Rasiyasan of Rastafari Midrashim and the Talmudim, right, shared this fact that they have right here, let's zoom in right here, you see right there in the center of the screen, they have a Chanukiah. And he had asked, what's the Chanukiah doing there, the Chanukiah? I said, wow, good sight, sharpshooter. Good sight. One of our, we say, Rastafari captains. A good view. Good eyes. They have the Chanukiah here, and you see the Chanukiah, right? As you zoom in, it's not clear, but you can still make it out. That is, they have 9 branches, 4 on one side, 4 on the other side, and 1 in the center, making a total of 9 branch. Right, but this does not appear anywhere within the narrative that we have in any of the books of Maccabees. Now, it's interesting when we look at the books in the Western tradition of Maccabees, right? And then we also look at the Ethiopic scrolls of Maccabees, also published by the conquering line of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, by Kedamawi Haile Selassie. Right, fulfilling that Revelation 5:5. There are other books as well, and that includes Maccabees, right? Some of the apocryphal books, some referred to as pseudepigraphal books, so forth. The Deuterocanonical. These are all the names they call it, Deuterocanonical books, and it includes books of Maccabees, which are somewhat distinct from the conventional books of Maccabees. So in the Ethiopic manuscripts, there's also the books of Maccabees, and it refers to the same period of time, but it's a slightly different documentation of that as well. Just to put that on, the beamer proverbially there for brothers and sisters as we get into further study of the books of Maccabees, both those that have been published in the Western, we say Gentile, the Western Church, as well as within the East, or within the Oriental, what's referred to properly as the Oriental Orthodox Church, including the Ethiopian Church, the 5 sister churches. So in the Ethiopic Bible and the Ethiopic scrolls, we have Maccabees, but it appears to be slightly a different translation of Maccabees. It's some additional information. It's like additional books as well there. And then also there's the 4th book of Maccabees. And it's the 4th book of Maccabees, that's the appointed reading, the 8 chapters. Now, if you find the 4th book of Maccabees and it's divided funny, it doesn't have 8 chapters, that's not the appropriate book and the proper translation and division of the chapters. The chapters in 4th Maccabee should be 8 chapters, and 1 chapter a day. The chapter a day is appointed for these 8 days of Hanukkah. But it was interesting right here, amongst, I think this might be the ISUPK, the Israeli School of Universal Practical Knowledge, right, and some of the other Israelites, they here have the 9 branch Chanukiah, right, which appears to be an addition, a latter-day Jewish addition, right, and it contradicts, in our view, the narrative of Hanukkah. Therefore, for us, it's appointed the menorah, because that is what Yahweh HaKadosh Baruch Hu Baruch Hashem, the Holy One, blessed be He, blessed be the name, also appointed for the worship and for the house of worship, for the tabernacle, the Mishkan. It was the menorah having 3 branches on one side, 3 branches on the other side, and the shamesh, the central branch, totally making 7 7 branches or 7 lights. All right, so it's the 7 lights. All right, so the narrative goes basically, just to paraphrase right here, that one day's worth of oil lasted for 8 days. Right, for 8 days. All right, the total feast, is roughly 8 days, but some say 8 to 9 days. So in the Chanukiah, on the Chanukiah, what we have is, let's bring this forward right here so one can see right here. Boom. This is a good example right here. Right? So there's the menorah, which is scriptural, biblical, and is commanded, right, by Yod Hey Wah Hey, Yod Hey Wah Wah Hey, by He who be who He be, by Jah, by Jehovah, by Hashem. And we have the Chanukiah, right? And that's one of the ways that it's written. There's a few other ways that it may be written, but this is one of the conventional ways, Chanukiah, right? With the 9 branches. Now, this definitely is, I guess, kind of like a modern day Jewish fable. Right, as the scripture says, like, to avoid these sort of fables. This is a modern day fable among many of the latter day Jews, and in latter day what's called Judaism. They utilize the Chanukiah. For we, the black Jews of the line of the tribe of Judah, we utilize the menorah. Now, of course, there will be the question of, well, how will we utilize the menorah for an observation of 8 to roughly 9 days? Well, very easily. How did they, in the time of Yehuda, Maccabees, and the Maccabees, and the time of Hanukkah, how did they originally observe the Feast of Dedication or the Feast of Livocation, the Festival of Lights? Well, what is this based on? What is it based on? The 8 days, right? The 8 to 9 days. Well, it's based on 1 day's worth of oil, 1 day's worth of zayit, the shemen, the oil, lasting for, right, 8 lights. That's the miracle. That's the basic miracle, right? That's a basic sign that 1 day's worth of oil lasted for 8 days. 1 day's worth of oil lasted for 8 days. So now let's just think about this for a moment. What did they use in the time of the temple, right? The time of the Haykal, the time of the temple, during the time of the Maccabees? Did they use a Chanukiah? No. Was a Chanukiah commanded or appointed? No. What was commanded? What was appointed? The menorah. Ha-menorah. We could go to the scriptures, to Ha-Torah, Asitelequis, Be-Ha'elotika. I think it's in the Torah portion, Be-Ha'elotika. And Be-Ha'elotika, where it speaks about how Aaron and the Kohen Gadol, right, would go into the Mishkan, will go into, we could say, the tent, right, the first compartment of the tent, right, and would would step up to adjust, to clean the wicks, clean the soot off of the menorah, right, and to adjust the wicks, so that the light would continue to burn bright. And this will be a daily responsibility of the Kohen Gadol, right, to adjust, to step up, to adjust, Be-Ha'elotika, when you step up, when you light up, when you go up to light the lights, right? So the Torah, the 5 books of Moshe, gives us the context as well as the precepts, the commandments, also the specs of the holy furniture and the items, the furniture, the instruments, should we say, the instruments used in the worship of the Beit Yisrael, of the Beta Israel, right? And it clearly points out the menorah. And during the time of the Maccabees, it was the menorah, the 7-branch lampstand. Now, there's a difference between lampstand and candlesticks that are used today. Today is the candlesticks, or some refer to as the candelabrum, is used today, right? Basically, today, more conventionally, is used candles, burning the candles. So the tradition for Hanukkah among Latter-day Jews is to get a Chanukiah and to start out burning, with the center one burning, and then light each candle on each day. Very nice, it's a very nice tradition. It's kind of, as they would say, easy peasy to teach your children that way, like one day, first day you light one, the next day you light the next one, and so forth and so on until you get to the 8th day, and then all of them are lit. Okay, that's wonderful. That's nice. Very nice. Right? But it's more of a Jewish fable, that, right? What we have in the time of the Maccabees, actually, is that all 7 lights were able to keep lit over 8 nights. That's what we have. We have the 7 lights of the menorah of the lampstand were lit from 1 day's worth of oil. So in other words, 1 day's worth of oil, which would be enough oil for the light to light for 1 day, all seven to light for 1 day, was able to keep lit for 8 days. For 8 days. Right? For 8 days. That was the miracle right there. Right? So therefore, how should we? We should do the same thing. Right? Basically, keep the lights lit for 8 lights. Right? Keep the lights lit. Now, as we mentioned, the difference between lampstand, right? Lampstand is powered by oil. All right, so the original menorah was a lampstand, and it's very important that we emphasize the context of lampstand versus candlesticks. See, because a candle is powered by, the fire and the wax. Right? That's not what they used. They did not use candles during the time of Maccabees. Now, this doesn't mean that we cannot use candles today, but it's to understand the principles, right? Because it's a very important principle in connection with the oil. What does oil symbolize Hebraically? In the real Hebrew spirituality, what does oil symbolize? The connection of oil and spirit is very important, as well as the fire. The fire, as he says, my word is not my word of fire. In Ermias, and Jeremiah speaks about he who he be, HaKadosh, Baruch Hashem, the Holy One, blessed be he, blessed be the name, right? Who we may refer to in the kind of anglicized sense of Jah and Jehovah, right? He said that his word, right, is a consuming fire. He's a consuming fire. His word link with fire, right? And then the oil link with spirit, both in the sense of the oil that powered the original menorah, the original lampstand, right? That lampstand. And we find the lampstand even in the Brit Chadasha, as we find the Feast of Dedication in John chapter 10, I think verse 22, also in the Brit Chadasha, but also in the Chazon of Yohanan, called the Revelation, Yohannes Rai, the Revelation of John, the vision of John, the revelation of John. We also have HaMenorah. We also have the menorah featured there, right, as well. So that's also another very important link, seeing where we have the lampstand, right, throughout the scripture. But sometimes we will have to put to the search, when we're searching these things out, we have to put in candle at some times because of some of the translations into English, and because the conventional lamps they use candles today, right? Remind me of the Rastafari chant, Jehovah is I and I light, I and I don't need no candlelight, Hallelujah. There's no night there, right? Because of that illumination, right? So for us, just to make this kind of like a basic point of order based on the precepts, because this question has come up and often does come up, concerning, well, menorah or Chanukiah, right? In other words, the 7 or the 9. We say the 7. Why do we say the 7? Because he who he be, Yahweh Jehovah HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he says the 7. And the 7 is known as the menorah. The Chanukiah is a latter day, you could say, invention, and then it becomes somewhat fabulistic. It becomes like a fable, one of the Jewish fables, later on. You hear, I go over some of the research and available information. Very good page. The Wikipedia also goes into, some of the basics concerning, the Hanukkah and Chanukiah, just for ones to get a basic point of reference. And, they go through it and they basically make it seem as though Chag HaUrim, the Festival of Lights, originally it was 1 day's worth of oil, which was lighting the Chanukiah. There was no such thing, all right? There was no such thing as the Chanukiah, all right? Because the whole purpose of the feast and the festival and the dedication, the livication, was to renew it as it was appointed to be renewed. In other words, to renew it from the corruption, the simulation of that which was outside of what Jehovah had appointed. All right? And what did he appoint? Now, here's where we have to just bring up the scriptures as the point of reference right here. So here we are using my sword, this Hebrew interlinear, the interlinear translation, and we have the Strong's Concordance words already there on the highlight for best point of reference. So here we look up dedication, right? Dedication, dedicating. Well, we're looking at the root right here, so we can kind of grab all of the main points of reference within the net, as it were, for our study here. So here we have Numbers, Bamidbar, the 4th book of Moshe, the Hebrew book known as Numbers. Numbers chapter 7, verse 10, where it says, and the princes offered for dedicating of the altar in the day that it was anointed. Even the princes offered their offering before the altar. Now let's look at the H2598. The H2598, here we have Hanukkah. There's the word right there, Hanukkah, right? So there we have Hanukkah. Take a screenshot of that right there, Hanukkah, right? Hanukkah, right? Hanukkah. The basic definition is dedication, consecration. Now you can see that the origin of the word, according to Strong's Concordance of the Hebrew, biblical Hebrew language, points to the H2596. Right? We're going to go to that first, but let's first things first. So Hanukkah in the Hebrew is a feminine, right? A feminine noun, right? Strong's definition from the H2596, you see where it's initiation. So we can and should refer to Hanukkah as the Feast of Initiation. What is initiation? Initiating something is to begin, to start. It's almost like a reboot. So Hanukkah becomes as a rebooting, right? A kind of a rebooting, right? A rebooting, like if a system, like on your computer, if you're using your computer is acting funny, it's acting off, it's not responding properly to commands, so forth and so on. What do ones suggest and what do ones often do? They reboot it, right? Reinitialize it, reinitiate it, right? So this is what the season refers to, Hanukkah, Chanukiah. So that's the sense and the context of dedication within its common Western translation, or as we as Rastafari refer to as livication, right? Livication, like to liven it up, right? To relight it, relive it, initiate it. That is to consecrate, isecrate it, dedicating or livicating, dedication or livication. So let's go to the root right here, the H2596. When we click on the H2596, we come up with the word right here. We come with the word Chanak. 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 What is Chanak? Now, Chanak, interestingly enough, is the root, Hebraically speaking, Chanak, Chanukah, right, is the root of the name Enoch. Hanok or Hanok, Hanok. So we have Enoch. And remember, Enoch, he walked with Ha-Elohim, Ha-Elohim, the true good, the true God, the Almighty. He walked with the truth, right? So we have Chanak. Chanak here, BDB brings it out as to train, Chanak. Remember, Chanukiah, initiate, to restart or to start something up, right? To train, to dedicate or to livicate. Then they also have the word inaugurate. Now, inaugurate, we put strong quotes around that right there, strong quotes, because auguries has to do with romantic worship, and it has to do with like birds, like divination in a foreign, Gentile, Western sense of it. The Romans, they have inauguration, like a president or somebody in the office in the Western Gentile world, they say he's inaugurated. Well, this has to do with auguries. So look up auguries. If you look up auguries, if you don't know what auguries are, get to know what auguries are. Basically, what they do is they kill some birds, and they open up the birds, and they look at the intestines of the birds, and they forecast whether it's going to be a good year, good day, bad day, so forth and so on. That right there, we say hatafaya bun. Right? Bun that out. We don't deal with that right there. So therefore, we also seek not to deal with the word, right, properly in our order, after the order of Malachiah, Tzedek, the Melchizedek order. We don't deal with that. So instead, we would say initiate, right? To initiate, to train, to dedicate, livicate, to initiate. Now, here's breaking down the word further, the kal, different being yanim, the binyanim, right, which is like the verbal patterns for the verbal forms, active, passive, the active and the passive and reflective. There's the different senses of the word, like to train oneself, to train somebody else, to be trained. All of that is broken down when we get into the Hebrew binyanim, the binyanim, not Benjamin, Benjamin, but Binyanim, right? So here we have just one of the Binyanim here, the Kal form of it, which means to train up, like to train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he would not, in that kind of a context, to dedicate, to livicate, right? Here, getting to Strong's. Strong's is a primitive root, a very ancient root, right? Properly is to narrow, right? The narrow, not the broad way, right? The broad way, but the narrow. Because the broad way leads to destruction, downstruction, but the narrow is the gate. Robbeinu, our rabbi, the rabbi of rabbis, Ha'adon Yeshua, Ha'notzri, right? Yeshua HaMoshiach, says that narrow is the gate that leads to life. So figuratively, in the figurative sense, the Chanak in the figurative sense is to initiate, and you get the word right there, to discipline, right? So for I and the Rastafari discipleship, the discipleship of Negus and Neges, of the King of Kings, the discipline, discipleship and the discipline. So dedicate again, train up right there, right? And we have, let's just do this right here, just for the record right here, right? And then let's bring this up right here. Let's compare. So now there's Chanak. Now, Chanak ends with a kaf, ka sound. Chanak ends with a kof, for Q, right? Or special K, right? A Q sound, right? This is not what we're looking at. It's not Chanukiah. that would be like to strangle yourself. Chanak. We're saying chanak. Right? So they just said to compare this right here. Right? The different forms of the verb. Very interesting right there. But that's not what we're looking for. Now, one more thing we seek to do right here, at least right now, is point out that Numbers chapter 7, scripturally, biblically, was the first Hanukkah. Right? The first Hanukkah. Right? So what was the first Hanukkah? Where was the first Hanukkah? It was Bamidbar in the wilderness, and we find it in the book known as Bamidbar in the Hebrew, the book called and known as Numbers chapter 7. Right? Now this also very interesting because for the 8 or so days, right, this is what is read, right? The blessings on each day. So for each day of Hanukkah, the appointed reading, right, Hebraically, we say Judaically, is Numbers chapter 7, right? The day 1, day 2, like what I said, like on the first day, on the second day, on the third day, and as we go through this right here, right, it gives the overview right here. These are the gifts, right? These are the gifts for the initiating of the Mishkan. They were initiating the sanctuary. They was initiating Hamikdash, the holy place, the sanctuary. They was initiating the service that would take place in the Mishkan, in the dwelling place for Yod He Waweh, Yod He Wehe, Yahweh, right? For he who be, who he be, Hakadosh Baruch Hu Baruch Hashem, right? So right here, as we go through it, like it goes through it. And when you get into the chapter, let's just show ones in the chapter what we mean right here. As we go into the chapter, right? As we go into the chapter, it goes down here, right? It's the second day. So you see what's the second day? So the second day portion will be read on the second day of Hanukkah, right? In Numbers chapter 7, right? Here at verse 18, right? Then as we go further down here, it goes down here and it says on the third day. This will be read on the third day of Hanukkah, and so forth and so on to the fulfillment of Hanukkah, right? To the fulfillment of Hanukkah. Now, the next point that we'd like to share right here, right, is to put within the search the H2598, right? The H2598, right? The H2598. So, interestingly enough, we find 7 verses. There's 7 verses where we have Hanukkah, right, here in the Bible. Here we have in 2 Chronicles chapter 7, verse 9, it says, and in the 8th day, note that right there, the 8th day, because observance of feasts and festivals, even the appointed feasts and festivals of the 7, there is the Shemini Atzeret, the 8th day assembly, or known as a solemn assembly. Bringing up the word right there, Atzara, Atzeret, Atzara, Atzeret, right? Atzara, a solemn assembly, the 8th day, right? That 8th day, a holiday, feast, festival, right? So all of these areas are scriptural, biblical. So this gives us the authorization, right, according to Hakadosh Baruch Hu, for the observance, as it also points out the menorah. The menorah is also found here in HaTorah. The Chanukiah is not found, right? The Chanukiah. We have Hanukkah also here in HaTorah, also in the Ketubim, right? This is one of the books of the Ketubim, the writings, right? Here in Nehemiah. Right, in Nehemiah chapter 12, verse 27. Did we touch on this right here? Yeah, let's go over this. 2 Chronicles 7 and 9. And in the 8th day, they made a solemn assembly, for they kept the dedication or the Hanukkah of the altar, Ha-Mizbeach, the Mizbeach. The Mizbeach, speaking of the altar, was Chanukkah, right? 7 days. And the feast, 7 days. The feast for how many days? 7 days. Here in Nehemiah, right, in Nehemiah, we have, and at the dedication, that's the same word, Hanukkah, of the wall. So when the wall was Hanukkah, right, when the wall was dedicated in Jerusalem, of Jerusalem, they sought Halloween, the Levites, the Lewawian, out of their places to bring them to Jerusalem, to bring them to Jerusalem, keeping it Levitical, right, to keep the dedication, the livication, the Hanukkah, how? With gladness, both with thanksgivings and with singings, with cymbals, psalteries, and with harps, right? Then we get to Psalm 30. In Psalm 30, the first verse in the Hebrew, right, we have a psalm and song. So both it is a mizmor, it is a chant, Isis, intonation, and it's a shir, a shir. It's like in amongst I and Rastafari, even in the dance hall, it's like sing J, where one would chant, right? One would chant the relics, right? Chant, and then one would sing. So it's chanting and singing. A psalm and a song. Chanting and singing when? Where? At the livication, at the dedication, at the Hanukkah, right? The Hanukkah of the Beit of Dawid, of the house, the Beit of Dawid, of the house of David. I will extol thee, I will big thee up. Yahweh Jehovah, he who be Hakadosh, Baruch Hu, Baruch Hashem. Holy One, blessed be he, blessed be the name. For the eye has lifted me up, have lifted I up, and has not made my foes to rejoice over me. So we see right here in Psalm 30, there is a Hanukkah of the Beit Dawid. There's a Hanukkah of the Beit Dawid, of the house of David, right here in the Psalms, the Hanukkah, right? Now this is the Hanukkahs that we have right here, right? Mentioned directly, there's seven. There's seven. So what we did is just look up the direct Hebrew word to find the verses, right, where we have Hanukkah, right, in the Old Testament, Brit Shana. We don't really like to use that name Tanakh as many ones. That's another fable too. That's another latter-day addition, right, that seems to go away from the real context, the Brit Shana, right? Now, one more area right here. Let's go back to that word dedicate, right, as we spell it right there, Dedicat, dedicat, right, dedicate, right? And let's go to here, right? Now it's interesting right here, Hanukkah. We also have that in the Aramaic, right? In the Aramaic, and Daniel, right? Right. Then we have it in John. Now here we have it twice in the New Testament. There's twice in the New Testament. When we look at the New Testament Hebrew as well, twice in the Brit Chadasha, where we have Hanukkah. In John's Gospel, chapter 10:22. Now, this is during the first century time, right? The first century, roughly what is called the first century AD, or some say CE. And this is a little less than like 400 or so years, right? To understand this time period, really within a 200-year kind of period of time, roughly after the original Hanukkah, right? After Hanukkah. So was Hanukkah observed? This is for those who may say they're more New Testament, as it were. Hanukkah is there. And it was at Jerusalem, the Feast of Hanukkah, and it was winter. Then we have Hebrews, the epistle to the Hebrews, chapter 9, verse 18. Whereupon neither the first, speaking of the First Testament, the italicized words means the word's not there in the Hebrew, and of the Old Testament especially, and not of the New Testament. So whereupon neither the first was dedicated without blood. Right? Neither the first was dedicated without blood. Now the fuller context is there, but when we look into the Hebrew, let's look at the Hebrew right here. All right, let's look at the Hebrew right here. Right, and we have it right here. Lakein gam ha-rishona lo chunaka, lo not chunaka, That's these words right here, right? Let's go right here. That's these words right here. Lo Hanukkah was not Hanukkah, was not Hanukkah, right? Lo Hanukkah, right? Below dam, below dam, below dam, without blood, right? Speaking about, of course, speaking about these precepts right here concerning the Testament, right? And also concerning Moshe and Moses, right? Connecting the Old Testament or the Brit Yashana principles with what has been fulfilled in Ha'adon Yeshua HaMoshiach, fulfilled in and through Yeshua HaNotzri, fulfilled in and through Adonenu Arovenu, our master, our sovereign, our rabbi, the rabbi of rabbis. So yes, I and all true Christians have a rabbi. Right? All true Christians are Talmudim, are called to be disciples. Right? That means in his discipline. Right? Not just what we feel like, but what has been commanded that is true and right. So here, just to get that overview, right, of Hanukkah, right, of Hanukkah, right, let's go right here, of Hanukkah, and then there's the other areas in Scripture where we see, even if we go further, if we go further, we can see other areas of the Hanukkah, and to say Hanukkah, you know what I mean? Like here it says, and he brought into the house of Elohim the things that Abiyo, his father, had dedicated. Right? Now here it uses this word Kodesh, right? Made holy, set apart. That's a little different sense, right? And it says that he himself had dedicated, right? But we looked at the direct words concerning Hanukkah, right? So there's that sense of dedication too, right? There's a sense of dedication, right? Here we have Chanukiah, right? Here in Ezra chapter 6, verse 16. And the Bnei Yisrael, the sons of Israel, HaKohanim, the priests, HaLoim, the Levites, and the rest of the children of the captivity, they kept the Hanukkah. They kept what? They kept the Hanukkah. So even in Ezra's time, which precedes the time of the Maccabees, which is before the time Maccabees, there was Hanukkah. So understanding and getting a good understanding of what Hanukkah is, and also why we observe at this time in this season of the year Hanukkah, right? Because of the Maccabees, but recognizing that Hanukkah in and of itself was not something that the Maccabees made up, right? It was something that already existed from before, and then getting into the Hebrew, right? The Hebrew, what does the Hebrew word mean? What's the context of the meaning? And here, right here, Chanukiah again, in Ezra chapter 6, verse 17, and offered at the Hanukkah of this house of Ha'el Elohim, and 100 bullocks, 200 rams, 400 lambs, and for a sin offering for all Yisrael, 12 he-goats according to the number of the tribes of Yisrael. Right? So there, we find even in Ezekiel, okay, this is Haram. Right? So not everywhere in the Bible we find dedicated, right, is necessarily Hanukkah. But in many of those instances, we've already covered those instances right there, just looking through right here and seeing if there's any other, right, Hanukkah. Now, what's interesting is that there is the Aramaic spelling and pointing of Hanukkah, right, with an aleph, and then there is the more Western Shemitic or regular biblical Hebrew, Western Shemitic pointing of it with a hey, Chanukiah, the H at the end, and Chanukiah with an aleph. That's what we found within, what was that? That was Daniel. In Daniel. We have it in Nehemiah. We have it in Ezra. right? Ezra. But the main verses that we have, as we touched already on the main verses for Hanukkah, right? Let's bring that up right here. The main verses are these 7, right? And chapter 7 of Numbers is also a very important point of reference. And the 2 points of reference we have in the New Testament, particularly in John's Gospel, chapter 10, right? Chapter 10, verse 22, right? So for us, Chanukiah or no Chanukiah, for us it's no Chanukiah. But if one chooses to use a Chanukiah, that's their choice, so be it, right? But for us, in just keeping with the main principle of Hanukkah, right, linking with 1 day's worth of oil. It wasn't 1 day's worth of oil, like 1 light came on one day, then 2 lights came on the next day, then 3 lights came on the 3rd day, and so forth and so on until the 7-8 days. No, it was all the lights of MENORAH, right, were burning, right? All the lights of the menorah were burning for all the days, right? All 8 to 9 days. Now, here we saw this right here, just summing this up. And they said, when we put in the search, menorah versus Chanukiah. You see this right here, menorah versus Chanukiah. They said that most people, including Jews, we say, what does that mean to them, right? Incorrectly refer to this as a menorah, when in fact the correct name for the candle holder is Chanukiah or Chanukiah menorah. No. A menorah is what is correct, because the menorah is what they actually had, because they were renewing the temple worship as it was appointed by Hashem, as was appointed by Adonai, right? As was appointed by the Lord, right? And that was menorah. Now, the whole thing about the candle holders, lampstand, remember, the lamp used in the ancient holy temple in Jerusalem. They say that now it is a symbol of Judaism, so it's symbolic. But for us, it's not just a symbol, it is actual too, because it is according to the precepts and the command of Yahweh Eloheinu, of He who be, our Elohim, right? Then we go further right here. Well, this is now speaking about the winter solstice, because this will precede that particular time as well. Just take a screenshot of that. Let's see, a screenshot of that. Okay, this is a different one right here, just to have this for even future point of reference. And here in this season right here, right, this here in this season, this is when it begins for us as well, from the 10th, the evening of December 10th, and ending the evening of Friday, December 18th, right, in this respective season right here. Some of the basics of the who, what, and why. This is how others observe it, but it's not how we observe it. How will we observe it? For those 8 days, keep all the lights burning, right? Because it was 1 day's worth of oil. Remember, 1 day's worth of oil, the zayit, that lasted for 8 days, right? That lasted for a whole Shabuah, right, to the 8th day. A whole Shabuah, a whole 7 days, a whole strong, to the 8th day. So this is not how we observe it, but ones may, if they choose so. Even here on the ark, was it Titus? I think it was Titus's ark. You can see right there that they have a menorah. It was a menorah. We can see a menorah right there, and on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side of the screen, and for those watching the vlog, the video, you see the Chanukiah, right? So the Chanukiah is not what we don't recommend that, right? But we're seeking to recommend, right here, to recommend. This is like also very interesting. You see the difference, right? It's this, right, that is appointed, right? It is this right here that is appointed, right? Not these right here. This is a tradition that has come in, right? We will say this tradition came in after our time, right? This tradition came in among other, you could say other Jews, converso Jews, so forth and so on. But for us, right, it is the 7, right? So to keep the lights burning for 7 days, right? Now, of course, when I say, well, with candles, how would that be possible? This is why we recommend, the study investing in the lamps, right? The oil burn lamps. I think it was one sister, Hail Up, Sister Bridget, also Brother Mawata, and some others who were mentioning how after a previous, reasoning and shi'ur, on Darasha on this particular subject matter, they had went out and purchased the lampstand that functions on oil, and how beautiful and bright the light was. So that's the miracle right there. To the other Israelites, so y'all say Chanukiah to the other black Hebrews and Hebrew Israelites and black Jews. So where is it in HaTorah? And do you think that's really what was going on? Or if you choose to use the Chanukiah, at least admit that, it's something that certain Jews made up, but it's at its best a Jewish fable, right? And it's not what is right and accurate, and it's not really dealing with what is in the book, right? And we, the people of the book, we should observe, what is in the book rightly and exactly. Now, here a little bit more on this right here. This, to sum up with this right here for the feast, chapter, the 8 chapters of the 4th book of Maccabees. The 4th book of Maccabees, the appointed reading, right? The appointed reading in the season, right? The appointed reading in the season, right? The words of His Majesty to fulfill the Torah's 10 commandments, the 10 utterances, right? Advice to all is to fulfill the 10 commandments, right? This is our flag, right? No cross, no crown. Yes, I, Rastafari. So here, looking forward, right? Looking forward, onward, upward, looking forward. Yes, I, Rastafari. Give thanks. Like, share, subscribe, download the free podcast app. Listen anytime, anywhere. Listen on demand to the LODs, to listen on demand. Download, look in the description, right, for some of the links, podcast app. Also, any support to the ministry of His Majesty. Give thanks and praise. Like, share, hit up your social media, share with others, because a lot of these questions will come up again and again, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you, me, I, and we free. Right? Whom the Son has freed, Haben, is free indeed. Shalom, Chabarim. Shalom.